Welcome to True Crime Documentary.
I'm a plumber and I'm on site for a job, and we're snaking a drain, and we've been pulling back. We probably pulled back about 10 pounds, 15 pounds of it looks like flesh type of stuff, meat, and we don't know what it is.
In December 2017, a group of plumbers was called out to a quiet neighborhood in Ontario. They expected the job to be routine. A blocked drain is usually a simple fix. Armed with their trusty drain snake, an essential plumbing tool consisting of a long wire with a corkscrew end, they anticipated that the blockage would be resolved in no more than an hour. However, what they encountered was far from ordinary. As the days passed, the neighbors grew increasingly anxious. They wanted a quick and easy solution to the plumbing problem. But what the plumbers discovered in the drains was anything but straightforward. Their gruesome find would soon attract the attention of law enforcement, transforming the area into a crime scene. The plumbers had stumbled upon evidence of a grisly murder, with body parts callously flushed down the toilet. This is the chilling story of Rori Hache. Let's begin with Rori Hache. Born in July 1999 in Oshawa, a quiet suburb in Ontario, Canada, Rori was a bright and spirited child. She had a fondness for animals and the elderly, and she kept herself busy outside of school as an Army cadet. By the age of 13, she had already earned the title of Cadet of the Year twice. However, when she entered high school a year later, her life took a troubling turn. At just 14 years old, Rori was offered crystal meth, and she accepted. This marked the beginning of a years-long struggle with addiction. Rori came from a troubled background. Her grandfather, Bernie Guindon, known as Bernie the Frog, was the founder of the Satan's Choice Motorcycle Club, which, at one point, was the second largest biker club in the world. As an outlaw biker with a history of drug and assault convictions, he had served 22 years in prison and fathered between 11 and 16 children. One of these children was Rori's uncle, Harley Davidson Guion, who owned a clothing store in Oshawa. Rori and Harley shared a close bond. He was a member of the Hells Angels and had his own history of drug offenses, proudly displaying a tattoo on his back that chronicled his prison fight record, 41 wins and no losses. Despite his tough exterior, Harley had a soft spot for his teenage niece. In 2016, when Rori was 17, she lived with Harley and his family while he was under house arrest for drug charges. Meanwhile, Rori's mother, Shannon Dion, had reported herself to the Children's Aid Society, believing it was the only way to get Rori the help she needed for her addiction. Unfortunately, the services provided did not help, but Rori managed to turn her life around on her own. The last 6 months of her life were filled with positivity. She had a boyfriend named Tony, and even her own apartment. Harley had recently given her and her mother $1,000 to assist with living expenses, but Rori had found a job of her own and had returned to school. Things were looking up. In August 2017, Rori's aunt, Michelle Guion, took her to a drugstore to buy a pregnancy test. The result was positive. Rori was pregnant, and she wanted to keep the baby. She looked forward to motherhood, but at the end of that same month, everything would take a horrifying turn. On August 10th, an unexplained fire broke out in Rori's mother's house, injuring Shannon and tragically killing her dog. This incident may have been the catalyst for Rori's downward spiral. Rori was a regular at a youth center called The Refuge, where workers noted that she had recently relapsed into drug use. However, they also observed that she seemed to be doing better in August. A few days before the end of the month, Harley met with Rori and noticed something unsettling about her demeanor. She was secretive and reluctant to discuss what was troubling her. He described her hug as heartbreaking, the largest hug she had ever given him, one that felt like a final goodbye. On August 29, 2017, Rori's friend and the friend's mother took her to the hospital. The exact reason for her visit remains unclear, but she was described as having experienced some sort of mental episode. CCTV footage captured them sitting in the waiting room, but shortly after, Rori was left alone as her friend and the friend's mother exited the hospital. She sat in the waiting room for 15 minutes before leaving, never having been examined by a doctor. This was the last time Rori Hache would be seen alive. When Rori failed to show up at the refuge for several days, her friends and guidance counselor began to worry. Together with her family, they raised the alarm. Some speculated that she had skipped town and reverted to old habits, but her closest family members were certain she wouldn't do that. Despite floating in the water, initially, they thought it was just a piece of trash, so they cast their lines toward it, hoping to clean up the lake. After about half an hour of effort, they managed to reel it close enough to catch it in a net and haul it onto the pier. One of them recalled thinking it might be an animal, perhaps a chicken, but the reality was far more disturbing. The grandfather, upon closer inspection, uttered the chilling words, "I think that's a body." What they had pulled from the water was, in fact, a female torso. When the police arrived, they quickly determined that the remains showed signs of trauma and had been deliberately severed from the rest of the body. Someone had killed a woman and disposed of her remains in a shocking act of violence. The scene at Oshawa Harbor quickly transformed into a disturbing crime scene. News crews arrived, and the area was filled with questions and very few answers. Who was this woman? Where did she come from? Who wanted her dead? The police took the torso away for identification, reaching out to other services to see if there were any unsolved missing person investigations that could provide leads. However, Lake Ontario is vast, and the authorities could not rule out the possibility that the remains had been transported to Oshawa from another location. The absence of the pelvis from the torso complicated the identification process, and the condition of the remains made it difficult to determine whether the victim had been pregnant. It wasn't until November 10th, nearly 2 months later, that the police were able to compare the DNA from the torso with samples provided by Rori's family. On December 28, 2017, the police were notified of a grim discovery made by an Oshawa plumber. The plumbers had been called out to address a pipe blockage in an upstairs rental apartment. The blockage had persisted for several days, and the other resident of the building, a man living in the basement suite named Adam Strong, had been unable to resolve the issue. He had even asked the upstairs neighbor for a plumbing snake to clear it, claiming that an inflated condom was blocking the drain. The upstairs neighbors, concerned about the situation, decided to call the plumbers themselves. The source of the blockage was traced back to Strong's basement apartment, which he had been renting for over a decade. When the plumbers knocked on Strong's door, they were met with a nauseating stench emanating from inside. Strong appeared nervous, commenting on the vile state of the drains. As the plumbers began to snake the pipes, they stumbled upon something horrific. The plumbers were horrified to discover what they believed to be human flesh. When the police arrived shortly after, they suspected that the material coming out of the pipes was indeed human remains. The plumbers were left shaken, realizing they had spent hours in contact with a man who was now the prime suspect in a murder investigation. When the police knocked on Strong's door, he opened it and almost immediately said, "The jig's up. It's a body." He was arrested on the spot. While sitting in the squad car outside, he continued to talk, chillingly stating, "If you want the rest of her, she's in my freezer, and she's pretty defleshed." The evidence. With a mounting sense of horror, the officers opened the freezer. Inside, they found various severed body parts, including a human head. The neck bore a tattoo that read, "Alive," the same tattoo that Rori had. The autopsy revealed multiple facial injuries and 2 fractures, but the exact cause of death remained uncertain. While drugs were found in her system, the quantity could not be determined. It was suggested that she might have been strangled or died from blunt force trauma. Whatever the case, it was clear that she had suffered a horrific attack. Strong's demeanor during the police interviews was chilling. Initially talkative, he seemed to take a perverse pride in the gruesome discovery. However, as the police pressed him for more information, they found it difficult to extract any useful details. They decided to return to his apartment to search for additional evidence. Inside Strong's apartment, they found it to be extremely messy and cluttered. Among the chaos, they discovered a number of restraining devices and adult toys, alongside weapons like a hammer. Disturbingly, they found Rory's DNA on the hammer, as well as her running shoes in a plastic bag that had what appeared to be blood spatter on them. Blood spatter was also found on the walls and baseboards leading into Strong's bedroom. The investigation revealed evidence of other crimes as well. Strong's online search history documented an obsession deepened. Perhaps the most damning piece of evidence was a specialty knife found in Strong's knife drawer. This type of knife is typically used by hunters to cut and skin animals, and it was the kind of tool that could have been used for Rory's dismemberment. When the police checked the knife for DNA, they were shocked to find not only Rory's DNA, but also the DNA of another victim, Kandis Fitzpatrick. Kandis Fitzpatrick, born in 1989, had gone missing nearly a decade earlier, in March 2008. Like Rori, she had struggled with addiction and was often seen on the streets of Oshawa. Kandis had a loving family who had been searching for her since her disappearance. Her family had reported her missing to the Durham Regional Police in 2010, expressing concerns about her absence since 2008. They had always believed that Kandis was a tough individual who would not have been an easy target for anyone, which made her disappearance all the more troubling. Now, with the discovery of Kandis's DNA on the knife, the police had a crucial lead in their investigation. They returned to Adam Strong, who initially wanted to discuss Rori. His callous and cruel attitude towards her death and the way he had dismembered her was chilling. He claimed he had begun the gruesome task on Christmas Eve, 2017, stating that it was the perfect time to do so because the neighbors were away. "So, the 24th is when you started?" the detective asked. "Christmas Eve?" "Yes," Strong replied. "Are you doing this while it's frozen or partially defrosted?" "Completely defrosted," he admitted. At this point, Strong had already been charged with committing an indignity to a dead body. He believed that as long as the questioning focused on the practicalities of what he had done after Rori was dead, he was safe from any more serious charges. However, the more he spoke to the detectives, the more they could push him to reveal incriminating details, and the more a judge could infer about what he had done to Rori while she was still alive. Despite his lengthy admissions, Strong did not provide an actual confession to either murder, the murder of Rori, or that of Kandis Fitzpatrick. He did, however, acknowledge knowing Rori, admitting that they had shared dinner and that she had visited his apartment on multiple occasions. He confessed to dismembering her body after her death and expressed surprise that her torso had been found in the lake, stating he didn't think it should have floated. He described the months it took him to dispose of her body parts as a result of procrastination, even blaming his possession of the knife with Kandis's DNA on it as procrastination too, admitting he should have disposed of it sooner to avoid being caught. He also acknowledged knowing Kandis. This combination of his admissions and the physical DNA evidence was enough for the police to charge Adam Strong with both murders. In November 2018, a year after Rori's torso had been identified, the case moved forward. Without a confession, the prosecutors had to focus on Strong as a person. Born in 1972, Strong was 45 when the plumbers discovered Rori's remains. He worked as a gas station attendant and occasionally as a film set security guard. Not much is known about his early life, but he claimed to have had a troubled childhood, blaming it for his behavior. "My actions. I don't think I would have made those choices had I been nurtured," he said, describing his upbringing as really bad. Strong also had a troubling history with women. Prosecutors called two women to the stand who had previously been in relationships with him over 20 years ago, when he was in his 20s. They testified that he had enjoyed bondage and choking, activities that were consensual for one woman but terrifying for the other, who felt her safety was at risk. This troubling behavior painted a picture of an aggressive and cruel individual. The defense attempted to suggest that perhaps the women had overdosed and that Strong had panicked, disposing of their bodies to avoid blame. However, the injuries found on Rory's head told a different story. Strong did his best to delay the trial proceedings, which were complicated by the pandemic, meaning much of it was conducted via video link. Even so, there were occasions when he refused to appear, complaining, "I was up all night," and insisting, "I'm tired, I want to go to bed." His arrogance did not endear him to the court. The count of murder carried an automatic life sentence. Perhaps resigning himself to his fate, in July 2021, Strong admitted to a prison guard the location of Kandis's remains. The police took him to an intersection in Oshawa, where he pointed out where he believed he had buried her body. They were able to recover Kandis's remains, finally offering her family the closure they had long sought. "I couldn't imagine going through this for 10 years, one family member said, reflecting on the pain of waiting for answers. "I've met that family in person. There's no way they didn't report that child missing. They are good-hearted people, and they are crushed. It's very hard to accept that this happened so close to the police station, so close to downtown." The community was shaken. "I've lived in Oshawa for 43 years. I was born and raised here. I never thought we had to worry about problems like this," a local resident lamented. "We had some bad people, but not someone straight from the pit of hell." The sentiment was echoed by others who expressed gratitude for the detective's hard work. "I do not get the attitude he has. In his mind, he's guilty of nothing. I don't have any words for this guy. I just wish he would think about doing the right thing for this city and for my family and friends, who will never be the same again because this has slaughtered us all." Strong's sentence would be particularly dangerous for him, given Rory's family connections to biker gangs, including the notorious outlaw biker Bernie Gindin, founder of the Satan's Choice Motorcycle Club. One convict remarked, "You can't kill the granddaughter of somebody connected to the Hells Angels and get away with it." Despite the convictions, many questions remained unanswered. The prosecution theorized that these were crimes of opportunity, suggesting that Strong had encountered Kandis and Rory on the street and kidnapped them. However, the chilling reality of how Strong met these women and the reasons behind their murders remained shrouded in mystery. What was most disturbing was the decade-long gap between his first kill and his second, raising concerns about what he might have done in between. The community was left grappling with the horror of Strong's actions and the implications of his crimes going undetected for so long. As the story unfolded, it served as a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities faced by those struggling with addiction and the predators who exploit them. The families of Rori Hache and Kandis Fitzpatrick continued to seek justice and healing, determined that their loved ones would not be forgotten. What do you think about this horrific story? How could Strong